Let's now settle for the details and then talk about the financial sector with respect to the banks going through a lot of challenges. Well, most of them have now released their half-year results. And if you go through them, it is clear that indeed the financial strength of these banks are in question. The following Business Desk report looks at these issues and asks ourselves, what is causing this problem?
The half-year results released by some 23 banks out of the 34 commercial banks, as seen by Joy Business, has raised a lot of questions about the financial strength of most banks in the country. This is because some of the major indicators that one wants to look at in carrying out an assessment of the bank's health, that is, the capital adequacy ratio and loans that the banks fear might go bad, or call it the non-performing loans, shows that things are not that good. This is because even some of the very big banks in the country, or call them the Big Eight, are under threat. Some of the banks, by our calculations, are even far below the industry benchmark of 10% when it comes to testing for their financial strength. Now, this was one of the reasons why UT and Capital Bank were closed down by the Bank of Ghana. So should the regulator act? But the caution here is that these results were for June ending, so the situation might have improved by now. The results also showed that most people are not paying loans taken from banks, a development that threatens the stability or the existence of these banks. But as many people have argued, has this problem come about because of the economic environment, or the regulator is not doing its work? Or could it be political interference on the part of the Bank of Ghana, which is preventing it from doing its work?
Well, that was an analysis trying to run through the half-year results of most of the commercial banks in the country and whether indeed they are that strong as we are being told. Now let's get onto the phone lines and get the views of a banking and investment analyst. Mahama Idrisu is joining us on the line for more analysis on this issue. What is causing this problem? Can these banks get out of it? And in a sector that sound as you've been made to. Mahama Idrisu, thank you so much for joining us on A Marketplace. And Mahama, let me first ask you, for you, what is causing this problem in terms of the fact that banks are really not that strong as you've been made to understand by the regulator?
Thank you, George, and thank you to your listeners. This issue has taken a few years. You've seen that along the years, government has taken some decisions, formed some committees and organizations to go and try and look at the asset qualities of banks along the year. But in the last 4, 5, 6 years, I'm sure what actually happened is that having gone through looking at the financial statements of banks and all those things, it has certain things that came out. One, we tend to dwell a lot on the collateral or security that the client needs to give before loans are given. We have very brilliant people in the banking sector who do a lot of analysis, but there are various factors that affect the work that they actually do. One, we're looking at the type of collateral people give. If I have a house that I've built 6-bedroom, nice house, I've moved to my 3-bedroom because everybody has married and left, and I want it. I'm trying to sell it, it's not being sold. What do? I go for a loan and use it as collateral. Someone has taken the burden of selling the house from me. In the next 1 or 2 years, the value goes down. The loan is not being paid. They are trying to sell. Owners go and threaten people who want to buy those houses, and they are not sold. And the bank is keeping the house. There's no liquidity in the operations of the bank. We're also looking at factors of the type of clients we are serving. Some purely political. Even though they are doing business, everybody is a political animal now. And we go in with the good of private business. But all the businesses we are doing to pay for those money that we are taking, all relates to ministries and political, what I call it, MMDAs and everyone.
Mahama, let me come in here. And when I went through the half-year results as well, I mean, we know that usually the small banks struggle. But even the so-called Big 8 banks, I've seen some numbers that gets me worried.
No, it's true. Probably if one, the reporting, two, what you probably be looking at profit. I see banks post very nice profit in the next 2-3 years.
And that's what I'm coming to, because I asked myself, what are these accounting firms doing? Huge profits, but when you dig down to testing their financial strength using the capital adequacy ratio and even the non-performing loans, it's not that good.
Yeah, because it depends on how they capture their financials. The blame actually go to the auditors per se, even though we haven't seen any legal case against auditors in this country. But what I'm trying to say is that, the stock of banks is money. And every period, there's a decision on lending, on recovery, and other businesses. That's why they have 3 months to try and produce their financial statement when the year ends. Because after 3 months, anything can happen and you won't have even a CD in the bank. So it's not the reporting, but it's the trading of the money that the various banks do.
Mahama, finally, the Bank of Ghana is saying that the economists will say that all other things being equal, maybe the first week of September, we could see the Bank of Ghana announce planned capital increase. Range could be between 250 to 500 and maybe 30 million Ghana cedis. Can this address this problem?
If you ask me, like somebody had already written in one of our financial papers, it's not only the capitalization that will probably take us out of the banking problem. We have to strengthen supervision. We have to make sure that the banks have direction on their own as to what kind of... Everybody will be targeting every client, actually. But the big ones are not working out for them now. Either they are borrowing below a base rate, or there are those who default. And when there are large amounts, it goes to sit on the balance sheet and it causes troubles for them. So capitalization, yes. Everybody will do it to allow you to do big ticket transactions, to allow you to expand and cover, and mobilization of deposit will be high, to create employment and all those things. But George, me and you, at the back of it, what happened? Bad loans, no recovery. This same capital that we have increased and everybody has gone around looking for money, both outside and inside, end up in the land, in in buildings, and in business that never pay. And that brings me back to the capacity. Fine cash flow, fine accounts. The money is given. That's the time the companies actually start going into problems.
Okay. Mahama Idrisua, thank you so much for your thoughts over there on this developing issue. And it will just not end as you've been so heavy on the reportage in the banking sector. So just this week, it was announced that UT and actually Capital can no longer operate. They lost their license. But the fear is that looking at what is happening in the industry in terms of convincing you to take your funds to the banking sector might be affected. We've been speaking to the Managing Director of First Atlantic Bank on all these concerns that have been raised about the potential threat to the banking sector because of this. Let's watch him.
What has happened is that Bank of Ghana, the regulators, have taken a decision to protect depositors and make sure that nobody loses money, even where the institutions themselves are in trouble. So that is a positive thing, and that must be seen by the market and depositors and customers as very good for them. Because if Bank of Ghana had allowed the institutions to go down, then those deposits will not have been guaranteed. So they stepped in at the appropriate time to make sure that depositors do not lose money. Okay? Now, what are the implications for those of us who are still in the banking business? I think that is good, because in a way, what has happened encourages existing banks to do the right things, not to expect a bailout from government or Bank of Ghana. So we are all looking inwards to see how we can further improve so that this never comes to us. And so for the market, it helps. This kind of action would, in my view, help to improve the system.
But some would say that our market is not that sophisticated, some would say. And for the sophisticated market, yes, these things will be downplayed. But a market where people, even when banks go to the rural areas to mobilize deposits with the van, they go about saying that they have taken our money away, even though there are electronic platforms where you can even withdraw from an ATM in that locality. And this is the kind of market that you are playing in, and what signals this is going to send, sir?
I think we don't do our people much service. We don't give them much credit when we look at things in that respect. I mean, we've been all over the country talking to depositors and clients up and down. And these are smart, intelligent, and these are people who know what they're doing. They know the difference between the different banks. They understand where they want to put their money. They know where they get good service and where they don't. So I think there are issues, obviously, of understanding, but we should not play down how sophisticated, in a word, the market is. Now, that said, we cannot rest. We have to keep educating the market to understand what it is, and that in choosing, they also have to look for prudent, well-established institutions to put their money in. It's as simple as that.
So there's talk about the contagion effect and the impact of this development also on some local banks. You remember that these two banks that have actually gone down are local firms. And so what do those who also manage in local firms have to say about it? The owner of Omni Bank, that is Dr. Sian Ejapon, has also been sharing a thought on this development.
Why will a bank fail? Its systems, its management, there are so many things that goes into it. So a bank fail due to so many things. So I'm saying that the local banks must be looked at the way they are being supported in doing business. Omni Bank is an upcoming bank that is growing and developing very well. We shouldn't use what has happened as a yardstick to judge every bank that it will fall. No. So if there's opinion that because UT and no, UT, we know UT, and these days there might be something that have happened that it have resulted in this. And I'm saying that other banks, if it's other countries, they will savage them, they will support them. I'm calling for supporting. Support your own, build your own. No one will build your own for you. So I would say the Bank of Ghana should now look at these local banks and see how best they can help them and assist them to grow. In other countries, like India and other, they support the local banks. They are foreign banks, like China. They are foreign banks. But the local banks, the Chinese banks, transact most of the businesses.
This is Dr. Sian Ejapon is owner of Omni Bank, one of the most rising banks that have been doing very well, and it's also a local bank. So let's though stay on this development in the banking sector. And as I said earlier on, that all other things being equal, the governor is saying that by the first week in September, they could increase the minimum capital, or the capital that every bank should hold before they can operate in the country. So are these banks ready for this announcement, or some might be struggling, or they will struggle to meet this capital? We've been speaking to the president of the Ghana Association of Bankers, Alassane Andani, on this issue, and he believes that some of the banks will struggle indeed.
To put the banks into tiers. The top tier banks who've been around, and understand this economy and built up sufficient reserves on their balance sheets are pretty ready. You call them the top 6, top 7 banks. If you look at their balance sheets and what they have built up in there, they're ready easily to meet whatever capital requirements there would be. There are new banks that have just come in, and shareholders have already put in what they think they can afford, and that might be an immediate stress. But again, as I said, the economy is quite fragmented and people are finding profitable niches to play. So, yes, there will be some bit of difficulty on newer banks and lower tier banks, but shareholders, if they still recognize and see benefit in the niche markets that they've set up these banks to play in, will step in. And probably, if he says it's going to be steep, that probably will be an indication as to whether we cannot start having conversations. But
some will say the 260 maximum is not that significant for anybody to struggle in meeting that.
Well, I didn't know the number. If it says 260 maximum, yes, certainly I don't think that is that is big enough. You know, people will still probably be able to meet 260 million.
But one would say that we knew this thing coming. Therefore, it shouldn't have been a problem for any bank to engage those strategic investors, to engage shareholders, to lay the ground for this.
No, I still believe that the banks engaged their shareholders and strategic investors because this thing has been out for some time. But nobody will come and tell you because we didn't know the number. Now that we know, or some number will come out in 2 to 3 weeks' time, then you go back and say, look, to your strategic investors and shareholders, we did indicate to you that the capital was going to go up. It's actually gone up. This is the level. It is only after that we would know who would be prepared to step onto the plate. But really, anything under 300 million Ghana cedis as minimum capital, I'm sure most banks should be able to meet that.
Are we going to see some measures and acquisitions taking place as a result of this?
I think if we take a cue from what the minister was saying, they, you know, in the further development of the financial services sector, they want to see 4 to 5 big local banks, and maybe some conversation will take place to ensure that those big local banks are formed, and that probably would be the beginning of that conversation. So, for example, if any bank is not going to be able to meet the minimum capital requirement, that probably part of the phasing in would be a conversation, you know, being instigated by the Bank of Ghana, Minister of Finance, to say, why don't you talk to these other banks to see how? So that becomes the route to creating those 4 to 5 big local banks which the minister spoke about.
Alassane Andani is the president of the Ghana Association of Bankers. So, some interesting development here. The finance minister is saying that they want to create about 5 big local banks in the country, or create the biggest local bank in the country. GCB might be one of the biggest. Now, they've taken 2 banks already. Could be other 2 banks be on the road to create that big local bank that government is looking forward to? Well, you might have to watch this space because it will be the first to tell you who will be the biggest bank in the country in terms of having that strong local holding as well. And the range as well, with respect to the capital increase, there's talk about from 260 to about 530 million Ghana cedis. So in the first week of September, expect this announcement from the governor of the Bank of Ghana. So how are local banks prepared for us? Now, if you do the analysis, basically, government is the biggest shareholder in most of the local banks in the country. Talk about GCB, talk about NIB, and talk about the fact that ADB. So the finance minister, how is he prepared to pump in capital into this bank at a time when government is trying to put the brakes on expenditure? Let's hear the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta.
The spirit of all of this is to strengthen the financial, the banks that we have. And we are very clear that there has to be indigenous banks participating in this new era that we are proposing. So I think between us and the central bank, we will need to find a way to ensure that indigenous Ghanaian banks participate. And it's up to us to use whatever instruments that we have to make that happen.
But are you going to support that initiative? Because as a shareholder, they call upon you that you are a significant shareholder in this bank, so help me recapitalize.
We will. We'll find a way to do that.
And the Financial Services Center, to how committed is government to it as well?
I think it's key to the transformation of the society. And I know in the Kufuor regime we started that and it kind of fell on hard times. But as I mentioned, we should sit with both the central bank and the Bankers Association and find a way to make it happen. I think I intentionally read a bit about the Singapore story to indicate really to all of us that if it could happen in 1965 to such a small island, we are more than ready to take that challenge up.
So that was the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, assuring us that those local banks that government has significant hold in it, it wouldn't be a challenge at all. So GCB, NIB, and of course ADB. So some assurance there, and the fact that they plan to create one of the biggest local banks in the country. So from banking, let's do some taxation, and how can we ensure that every business in this country pays its taxes. Now, the fact that some taxes, or the fact that the special revenue tax fall by the Ghana Revenue Authority is embarked on an exercise to clamp down on some 39 companies who have defaulted in tax payments. Now, the fact that the coordinator of the task force, Henry Sam, says this forms part of efforts to actually improve collections. He's been speaking on why they want to do this and the impact of this on revenue.
We have information that some of them issue their own way, which we have. The other phase is that this intelligence-led information was given by the Bureau of National Investigation. They will lead us to those places. We will then retrieve records of these businesses and then subject these records to verification through tax audit. And like the law requires, when we establish the tax liability, we'll find out whether if we impose a fine of 500 currency units or we multiply the tax that we have established by 3 times, whichever is going to be highest will be the tax that have been evaded. In addition, we would then come back, the evidence that we have gathered would be given to the CID, and then they will take up the businesses or the business owners to task to ensure that we secure prosecution and then conviction at the law court. If you pay the tax, it does not relieve the owners of the business from the criminal aspect of the offense that have been committed. So in addition to the taxes that we are going to establish through a tax audit, business also may face prosecution. As I explained, you have a case where when you are arraigned before court and after adducing the evidence before court, i.e. the invoices that were issued that we have custody of, we tender them in court, and if the process is consummated, what it means is that you may be fined or go for an imprisonment of not more than 6 months, or you may be committed to both, and that will be a decision by the law court.
So that was Henry Sam. He's leading the task force that is actually going out to clamp down on those businesses that have taken these invoices and they don't want to declare them to the state. My colleague Charles Zaite was on ground with the team. And Charles, so tell me, why there's action? Because now we understand the tax rates are down and everybody should be complying, including you.
Absolutely. You know, it comes on the backdrop of a specific investigation by the Bureau for National Investigations and the National Security in that very regard. You know, they did conduct this very investigation early in January. And out of the findings of this investigation, it does come out that 42 businesses, out of which we have just 3 complying to the tax laws. So 39 technically businesses have defaulted in issuing out, tax invoices to their customers and requests for goods and services. So that's the main reason why such, a move was taken by the government.
But the whole essence of this program is the name and shame aspect of it. So tell me, the big companies that you had to go and tell the staff to walk out and seal the premise.
Unfortunately, George, it was a very difficult decision for me to make, especially because the media was taken along in this very exercise. And we just visited 2 businesses.
Out of the 39?
Out of the 39. That was just 2 businesses. Okay. So the impression that I got and the information that I gathered was the fact that the remaining ones, the 37 businesses, are likely to include businesses that have, high standing, of which the GRA to some extent would not want to have them on the media. We are yet to clarify this very allegation or this very assertion, but this is the picture that's been put out there because all the businesses that we visited are just motels in that regard.
Interesting. Well, we will try and be getting these names. If our big companies again, we'll put it out, right?
Absolutely, but just before we wrap up, these defaulting companies are expected to report to the GRA by 2 p.m. this afternoon. If they fail to do that, the heads of these defaulting companies are liable to being, arraigned before court and subsequently prosecuted.
Charles Aite is the man. Trust him to get you all the details when it comes to these companies that are defaulting in their tax payments. You know, we have to get the money to grow the economy, right? Well, so let's look at and do some stories on our van. We try to promote those small businesses that actually are trying to do those good things out there, and we can encourage them. So my colleague, actually, Darrell Kwao, has been out there engaging these companies. Watch him.
Georgina Kumsen takes us on a tour of one of her 3 farms at Abutia in the Northern district of the Volta region. She loves to farm.
I stayed with my auntie and we used to have a poultry farm in the house. So I developed that, the passion from that place because they gave me the free hand to manage the poultry farm, and we used to dress bears during Christmas time. That was when I was in, I think before I went to the secondary school. So after that, I wanted to go into farming, but I did not have the opportunity till I had the opportunity to do my national service in Daboase. And I was lucky to meet a good coordinator at that time who helped me to unveil my talent.
Georgina saved and started a small nursery where she was cultivating vegetables for her community. Vegetable cultivation was not bad business, but Georgina needed something to set her apart.
So, you know, getting more details on this on Business Live later this afternoon at 5 p.m. We'll get you more details on these startups that are doing tremendous, or call it miraculous work out there in terms of growing these SMEs. So let's get some investment tips, because I know you invest a lot out there. Let's watch it.
Investment Tips is brought to you by Daffin Finance, Deposits, Investments, Borrowings and Advisory.
Investment constraints, the tax concerns. What is the tax implication of an investment product? This deals with the taxes of the investment returns. The implications of the taxes are: no tax implies a larger net return or proceeds. Tax-free investment periods or products are preferred to taxable investments naturally.
Investment Tips was brought to you by Daffin Finance, Deposits, Investments, Borrowings and Advisory.
Believe that you've gotten all those tips that you need so much to help grow your business, or even ensure that you get more anytime you place your funds in a commercial bank or with any of those investment firms out there. All too soon, you have to draw the curtain down on this program. Join us at 5 p.m. for Business Live. Have a good afternoon and see you soon.